this morning.
How long do you think the folks at Marco Island and Naples area will have to ride it out?
Well, the worst part is occurring right now. It will be clearing up here very shortly, not clearing up, but at least improving for them throughout the rest of the morning.
I see from some wire reports that there are some evacuations along the Gulf Coast that are starting to happen or should start to happen. Do you have some watches or warnings that you have already issued for those folks?
At 9 a.m., a hurricane watch was issued.
Have injury reports yet from South Dade.
Now, President Bush is keeping up to date on Hurricane Andrew. As he left the White House on a campaign trip this morning, Mr. Bush said that emergency federal aid will be available to many people who suffer losses from the storm.
I just very briefly want to express my heartfelt concern to the people of Florida on this devastating storm. Apparently it's one of the worst in probably the worst in 6 decades. We have already got 2 FEMA teams, that's the government emergency teams down there in Florida. I will be declaring today that Florida is a disaster area.
Bush is campaigning today in New Jersey and Connecticut. Administration officials say that he plans to propose $10 billion in new federal spending for job training programs. The plan would combine job training.
The number of people who are showing up, never mind just having the basics such as food or water. That is, they do not have that for these people. The Homestead Police Department was on full alert. I do know several of the members of the police department, and we were told that they were on call. So I suspect they are out. I know that the different, we've seen Metro police officials, which is the Miami-Dade Police Department, and it does appear that they have their hands full. We saw one Metro police officer literally use his cruiser to ram another car to get it out of a very dangerous area, and so his car has been used as a battering ram and is dented and virtually destroyed, and he continues to cruise around helping people in need that way.
President Bush says he will declare the region a disaster area. Aides say the government will wait for a list of the most devastated counties before the declaration is made. People from all around the country are trying to call Florida to find out about friends and relatives.
We're being inundated with phone calls at the emergency center with people that are asking about their relatives. At this stage, we don't have any of that information, and I hope they will wait much later before they make those calls, because they're tying up our lines as we're trying to move the kind of assistance and relief into the area that we need to.
Governor Childs says there's good news for people with relatives in Miami. He says that city was not hit as hard as originally believed. And residents along the northern Gulf Coast are bracing for Andrew. A watch has been issued from Mobile, Alabama to Sabine Pass, Texas. Residents in Grand Isle, Louisiana are being evacuated. Andrew is expected to regroup in the Gulf of Mexico over the next 2 days, then head north. It could hit the Gulf Coast as early as Wednesday. And residents of the Bahamas are cleaning up the mess Andrew left behind.
So the winds are starting to die down. That during the height of the storm, we were having only gusts up to just at 100 miles an hour. But I think now we've been dropped down to winds in the 50, 60-mile-an-hour range, and so we are definitely on the downside of the storm here.
Okay, all right. How well are you prepared if the storm should hit as badly as it's apparently hit in Homestead, Florida? Are you ready for those folks to be able to have to stay longer than they might have planned?
Well, yes, we are, but I think we're very pleased, because our early assessments show that our damages are going to be nowhere near what they have been over there. But yet again, we still need to see what's going to happen with the storm surge and the flooding that will result from that in the Marco Island, Everglades City, and perhaps the coastal city of Naples.
It's all over. Those who didn't take their awnings down lost them. I suspect that's what happened at my place. I would have reinforced the doors a little better. When I heard that it was going to be a Category 5 storm, I thought, I haven't done enough. There is no way. What I did to my place would not have withstood a Category 5 storm.
Or at least that it could have been. It had the possibility of becoming a Category 5.
That's right. We thought for sure it would be at one point.
At one point, we were only 5 miles off from being a Category 5, and I remember thinking, boy, it's gaining strength. It's still got the Gulf Stream ahead of it. how can we avoid becoming, but I guess you have to take into consideration that anything can happen with a natural disaster, in other words, Mother Nature. Anything can happen, anything is possible. In some respects, the high-pressure ridge that was sitting above the area for so long was responsible for steering Andrew our way. Had we had a few bumps...
Some pretty dramatic pictures.
That the death toll, as I said, will go up, and 2, the damage toll. Now, there continue to be reports of looting, and police are doing their best, from what we're being told, to try to contain things, but situations like in the shopping center are giving rise to reports that, at least where South Dade County is concerned, there is no law enforcement in effect right now. Again, Hurricane Andrew moved across here at 5 o'clock this morning, raked across South Florida, and is now headed for the Gulf of Mexico. So far, to repeat, the death toll stands at 3. This is Charles Zewe reporting live from South Dade County, Florida.
All right, Charles, thank you. We might add that the Cutler Ridge area is about 10 miles north of Homestead, and the eye of the storm passed right over Homestead. CNN's Bonnie Anderson is in the hard-hit town now, and she joins us with the latest. Bonnie?
Bobby, police sources had just told me that they have confirmed at least 3 deaths so far, 2 in a trailer home, 1 in a nearby neighborhood. We also learned that a mile north of Homestead, a young girl was killed when the roof of her home crushed her. I am at City Hall in Homestead. There is devastation all around. By that I mean buildings leveled. We're talking roofs completely lifted off, cars overturned, and trees strewn everywhere. Across the street, about a quarter of a mile, was a trailer park where there was once 400 different trailers. With the exception of 2 or 3 shells, they were all flattened, completely flattened. Just a few moments ago, I was speaking with Alex Muxa, the city manager, and with tears in his eyes, he said it took him 12 years to build this city, and he could not believe the devastation. He could not believe the destruction that is all around him. He and his crews are at work. They just restored power to the hospital here. We understand that the windows were blown out, but the hospital is up and running, and it will probably be receiving some of the casualties, the injuries from some of the nearby areas, such as Naranja, where we were earlier today.
We've got to get over there, take a look. We'll get you that video just as soon as we can. It does not sound pretty.
No, that's a highly populated area. It's very dense. Everything's very close together. That could be a tremendous blow.
And people there may not have evacuated. They may have tried to stick it out because that's further inland.
Right.
Well,
that's close to the
would be a surprise.
Kelly, I mean, my family, we live very close to where we thought the storm was going to be coming ashore. What was in the evacuation zone earlier when we were doing those stories yesterday, and I moved my family out to stay with my mother out in West Dade because I thought they'd be safer. So far, I think everything's okay, but we don't know. It seems like it's taken the brunt of the storm is out here where we thought we'd be safest and away from the water.
Just shows how unpredictable these storms could be, because that was the exact thought. We said go west, go west, go west. In fact, several of us were invited to stay in West Dade, in the Kendall area, thinking that that would be the one place to go, and wouldn't you know it, that seems to be away from the water, close to the Everglades. It would be safe, and yet
They just haven't stood up to the wind. This is a fierce, very, very fierce storm. We've seen Hugo, we've seen Gilbert and other places. The damage we're seeing here as we move further out, the reports that you just heard that we're getting, it sounds like we have suffered some terrible...
Telephone poles knocked down, light poles knocked down, but the further you got south, the more you could see that this is where Andrew cut his swath as he headed west. Everything in this particular area just literally wiped out. Roofs off nearly every single home. That's a standard. Cars with trees on top of them, that's nearly a standard. We saw a bus overturn. We saw an airplane at Miami International Airport, a 727, its nose gear down into the water that was on the access runway, the taxi runway. One event after the other that just shows the enormity of what happened down here in South Dade County. Bobby?
All right, John, one thing we were not seeing in the pictures there with you were a lot of people, and I'm wondering if they're still in evacuation centers at this time or whether they've moved out and are trying to assess the damage.
5 trailer parks, every single one of them, we have over 3,000 people live in trailer parks, have been wiped out.
Nearby Miami suffered its own destruction with heavy rains on the streets and houses flooded. At least 400,000 people are without power, and it could take weeks to restore it in some spots. Human loss was kept to a minimum, though, because of mass evacuation.
We're pleased with the number that did evacuate. We had over 650,000 people in shelters, and we know that a lot of people, in addition to that, got to motels and other places and all. So an awful lot of people did move out.
The effects of Andrew were felt throughout southeast Florida. Initial estimates are that $50 million in damage was done statewide, a figure almost certain to climb. The National Guard has been called in to guard against looting in the aftermath of Andrew's visit to Florida. Charles Ziwi filed this report from Cutler Ridge. I'm sorry we don't have the Ziwi report. We'll try and rescue it and give it to you later. After finishing with the East Coast, the hurricane attacked Florida's West Coast. Authorities say there are no early reports of serious injuries in that.
Homes into darkness and leaving behind a swath of destruction. Roofs were ripped from virtually every home in some neighborhoods along the storm's path inland. Hotels were demolished and shopping centers reduced to bombed-out messes. In the hours after Andrew roared through, looters pillaged many stores, carrying away unchallenged whatever they could cart off, including clothes and a bicycle built for two. National Guardsmen were brought into the area to stop the looting. They made arrests, but not everyone went willingly, particularly this man caught with a handgun. As the storm cleared, thousands of residents who evacuated or spent the night in shelters began going home. But for some, what they found was too much to bear. They took comfort instead in just being alive. The National Hurricane Center said it recorded wind gusts of 164 miles an hour during the height of the storm, which was the strongest hurricane to hit the Miami area directly in 27 years. Now that Andrew has punched Florida, the storm is in the Gulf, building strength and apparently taking aim on Louisiana.
And help out the police. The police is in charge of us.
How long are you going to be out here?
We're not sure. As far as we know, it might be the whole week.
Several people were arrested at the center for looting before the National Guard was called in.
And Metro Police here tell us they will begin enforcing a curfew at 7 p.m. tonight. That is for Dade County and all surrounding areas. The curfew runs from 7 p.m. this evening until 7 o'clock tomorrow morning.
We had from them a very small intense storm. Sometimes you have large intense storms like Carla. Sometimes they're small and intense. This was a small intense, and the area of the extreme damage was probably no more than 30, 40 miles across. So you had to go way down south of Miami to see the kind of damage that we've already seen in some of our videos. Now let's turn our eyes to the satellite at 8 o'clock this morning when the storm was emerging on the west coast of Florida. The eye passed just south of Naples in the Marco area, and you can...
Now the question is, where does the hurricane hit next? It hit first and hardest today on the east coast of Florida with winds that gusted up to 165 miles an hour.
Right now, the hurricane is in the Gulf of Mexico, expected to hit land again as soon as tomorrow night. The New Orleans area is one possible place for its next landfall. Death toll at least 12, including a minimum of 8 dead in southern Florida. Too soon to total up the immense damage, but you can bet it will be in the many billions. A curfew is in effect in Miami, and the National Guard's been called out. CBS News correspondent Bernard Goldberg was here in Miami with us when Andrew struck.
It was one of the most powerful hurricanes of the century, winds gusting to 165 miles an hour. And if the image makers like to think of Miami as an American paradise, in a flash, Hurricane Andrew turned Miami into a paradise lost. A million people have no electricity, no phones, and many of them have no water. Streets have become obstacle courses. Airports were closed. And tonight, National Guard troops are on the streets enforcing a dusk-to-dawn curfew.
Have a roof in the house, don't have nothing. Everything and everywhere is just gone. We've lost everything and everybody's homeless. I don't know what we're going to do.
I guess everybody's in the same shape around here. Some of them's whole houses are gone. I do have some walls left.
Homestead then raced, luckily for Floridians, across the very southern tip of Florida. Remember, the Everglades takes up a lot of that space, and 3 hours later entered the Gulf of Mexico.
Well, welcome to the Holiday Inn.
Welcome to the Holiday Inn, where we found not only a building destroyed, but lives in shambles too.
We are at the hotel. Just a few employees were staying because our houses. We lived on Holiday Road. There's no house. We have no house to go back to. And Paul, my brother,
my new car is we're in the bathroom with my brother and sister, and I was in the closet with some friends.
Are you Catholic?
Yeah.
Were you praying?
Oh, yeah.
All night. This was your room?
Yep.
Patrick Greenlaw.
Good evening, everyone. Susan is on assignment. From coast to coast, Hurricane Andrew ripped its way across Florida, and now the eye of the storm is sending a scare through the Gulf of Mexico. Homestead is one of the areas suffering the most from the deadly storm. This is some of the billions of dollars of damage the storm caused in Florida. It's left more than 1 million people without electricity. The hurricane is being blamed for at least 12 deaths. Andrew ripped its path of destruction across the peninsula. Homestead was right in the eye. Cutler Ridge lies just to the north. That's where CNN's Charles Jaco is. Charles?
Well, what you're looking at right now is what's left of a supermarket and pharmacy here in Cutler Ridge. Aisles destroyed, things overturned. What's happened here is that there was some looting. It didn't happen very quickly, but it did happen, and the National Guard moved in. However, the big story here, and we'll get back to this in a moment, is the fact that Homestead Air Force Base, just south of where we are in Cutler Ridge, is apparently completely destroyed. Now, Homestead Air Force Base is one of the major U.S. Air Force bases in the world. According to a spokeswoman for the state of Florida, quote, Homestead Air Force Base has ceased to exist. A spokesman for the Navy in Washington says that every building at Homestead Air Force Base was completely destroyed. Of course, the Air Force is making no comment about this yet, but the story seems to be that Homestead Air Force Base is pretty much of a complete wreck. It's nighttime here in Florida. It's a little after 10 o'clock at night. We were out earlier shooting some videotape of what it looks like, complete destruction here at this mall in Cutler Ridge. The situation, more on that.
At dawn, the road from Miami south to Homestead was a scene of increasing devastation. In Perrine, 150 patients at a nursing home wandered about in mud-soaked debris. The front side of the facility destroyed. On either side of the southbound highway, businesses with caved-in roofs, broken windows, collapsed walls. Looters searched the stores for whatever bounty they could find. In the small town of Naranja, firefighters treated the injured. This man had a severe gash in his neck. Fire rescue officials feared he might not make it to a hospital in time.
Welcome arrival prompts a visit by President Bush. We're going to tell you what the federal government is doing to help rebuild South Florida. Those stories and lots more when World News returns.